Hey everyone, welcome back to Intuitive Living with Suzanne. So, last episode, I told you some of my story and how looking back, I could clearly see how my life was different when I followed my intuition versus following some false sense of security doing what I should be doing. So, this week, I want to share with you some thoughts on using your intuition as you make choices and take chances in life. This is Suzanne Arjona, and you're listening to Intuitive Living with Suzanne, where we are tuning in to our inner voices and taking life to the next level. So, welcome back again, as I said, kind of continuing on from the last episode where I kind of gave some background on some of my story. Life is all about making choices. Everything we do every day is a choice of some sort, big or small. Doesn't really matter what you wear, what you eat, whether you work or not, what route you'll drive to the grocery store. So I often try to keep alternate routes in the back of my mind as we have trains that run through our area. And on occasion, I've gotten caught at a train crossing. So, case in point, the other day, I was stopped at a crossing that I've typically never been stopped at before. I always just go through and I've never seen those gates down. I've never seen a train go by there. But no big deal. I wasn't in a big hurry, so I sat there and waited. And it was this big, long freight train. So after a while, the train finally passed, and it was kind of weird. It took a couple minutes before the gate started to go up again. But then they got halfway up, and then they went back down. And then a minute later, the gates went back up again, and then back down right away. So this happened about 4 times, and most folks were getting really impatient and kind of squeezing over to the right lane to take the right turn and find an alternate route. I knew I could get around if I had to, but it would take me about 5 miles out of my way. So I stayed there for a while. But finally I was fed up with it. So I decided to merge over, go the different way. Well, just as I merged over to the right, the gates went up and stayed up. So I was already committed and I had to take the alternate route. So either way, I made it home, but I had to make that choice. So the longer I waited, the closer I was to actually going my original route, but I had no way of knowing that. At some point, I just decided to cut my losses and take the turn. So changing your route to the grocery store or home or wherever probably isn't a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Okay. But what about starting a new hobby or joining a social group? That involves a little bit more of your time and energy. You know, you're investing yourself into that. But it's still probably not life-changing overall. Okay, so but how about taking a particular job or getting into a relationship or moving to a new city or country? That's pretty significant, right? So making these more significant choices is where we're often challenged to take the bigger chances. Okay, we're rolling the dice with a lot more on the line. Let's say you start reading a book. It was highly recommended, it's a bestseller, all your friends are talking about it. You get 2 chapters in and you just can't go on. You're like, this is just, it's not my thing. I get it. I'm sure it's a great book, but it's just not for me. You don't see what all the fuss is about and it just doesn't interest you. So, how do you respond? You have a choice here. Do you feel obligated to finish it just because you started it? Or because you want to be able to talk about it with your friends? Do you force yourself to continue it even though it's really not enjoyable to you? Now, if this were for a class or required for work, sure, you still have a choice, but there's a little more at stake if you don't finish it. But if it's just for pleasure and you're not enjoying it, you have permission to put it down. Okay? This is a choice that you get to make. So, another example, what if you start a new hobby? Okay, let's say you decide you want to learn how to play tennis. Okay, so you take some classes, you invest in a decent tennis racket, you join a local tennis meetup group, and you meet some really great people there. Okay, you're really having a good time. But after a couple of months, you're just not feeling it anymore. Okay, it's just not doing it for you. Do you keep at it? I mean, you did spend money on lessons and equipment, and you do enjoy the company of the new friends you've made. Those are certainly valid reasons for keeping at it. But you do have a choice again. Is the trade-off for meeting up with your new friends worth the boredom or frustration you get from actually playing tennis? So sometimes the choices we need to make for our own happiness involve taking more significant chances. Maybe you can still meet up with your new tennis friends doing other things off the court, like hitting a movie or hanging out over dinner. If they're not up for that, maybe you need to make the harder choice of just moving on. Okay? So, that's for kind of a mid-range choice and change that you need to make. But then there are the bigger choices in life, like we talked about previously, like your job or career or where you live. So think about, why did you take that job or go into that career? Was your choice guided by what you studied in college or because it's a family tradition? After all, you spent 4 years and thousands of dollars on the education. It would be a waste not to use it, right? But at what cost? Okay. What is your level of life happiness when you're in this job? And if it's, not way up there, close to 100%, then you might want to reconsider, where you're working and what you're doing, and then maybe consider why you made that choice to begin with. Okay. So, when you're working, do you feel frustrated or angry or disappointed? Are you feeling bitterness about what you're doing or anything about the job? Are you getting burned out? Okay. These are all signs that maybe you're doing something that you're not fully aligned with. It's not something that you are fully vested in with your heart, and it just may not be the right thing for you. Doesn't mean it's a bad job, doesn't mean it's a bad career. It just means it's not the one for you. Okay. Um, in whatever we do, if it's what we're meant to be doing, we'll feel satisfied. We'll feel successful. Okay. You'll feel at peace each day. You'll have some sense of flow to your days. You'll be energetic about what you're doing. Okay. Now, this doesn't mean that if you're, in the right job or the right career, that everything is going to be 100%. Your life is going to be totally perfect. It's not like that. But overall, you will have more positive feelings about what you're doing than negative ones. Okay. So, as you make these choices throughout your life, big choices or little choices, it really doesn't matter. How do you feel when a choice arrives? When you're presented with an opportunity to make a choice, what do you feel in your body? And what goes on with the voices in your head and the feelings in your heart? Are you hesitant or tense? Do you tend to jump right in and think later? Like, oh, this is a great idea. Boom, I'm going to go after it. Or do you stop and do you consider all angles of each choice and move into procrastination mode, maybe not making a choice at all? So, all too often, we ignore these signs, these feelings that we have, and we choose to continue on our set path only to remain frustrated or bored or disappointed instead of making the choice to change our situation. So, I'd love to hear your comments about this subject and about making choices and making changes in your life. I'd love to discuss this with you in the comments below, and how we might move from feeling out of alignment with our choices and make changes to move us into full alignment. So, that's our topic for today. I'm so glad y'all came, and I look forward to chatting with you again next time. And meanwhile, I wish you all the brightest blessings.